Snow was falling thick enough to mute sound, the kind that swallowed engines and footsteps alike. At 14:47 hours on December 22, 1944, 6 miles south of Bastogne, a German general stood exposed in the turret of his command half-track and felt the ground truth collide with everything he believed about war. General Major Heinz Kokot lifted his binoculars into the white haze and froze. Through the snow, American Sherman tanks were coming north. Not scattered, not probing, but dozens of them, nose to tail, advancing in disciplined columns. Kokot lowered the glasses and checked his map, then checked it again. 48 hours earlier, the nearest American armored division, Patton's 4th Armored, had been roughly 100 miles to the south. German staff doctrine was explicit. In winter, on frozen roads, moving an armored division that far required at least 7 to 10 days. The Americans had done it in 2. Kokot keyed his radio and spoke carefully. American armor approaching from the south, estimated 50 tanks, advance speed exceeds all prior calculations. The reply came back at once, flat, certain. Impossible. Patton's forces are still assembling near Luxembourg. You're observing local reserves. But Kokot knew better, and he knew what it meant. The siege of Bastogne, the operation meant to split the American lines and seize the critical road junction before relief could arrive, was already collapsing. Not from poor tactics, not from a lack of courage. It was failing because the Americans had just done something German logistics declared physically impossible. 4 days earlier, on December 16, 1944, at Army Group B headquarters, Field Marshal Walter Model had leaned over a map of the Ardennes and stabbed a finger at one town, Bastogne. 7 hard-surfaced roads converged there. In winter, they were the only routes capable of supporting armored divisions through the forest. Model's concept was direct. Break through weak American lines, seize Bastogne within 48 hours, then drive west toward Antwerp, splitting the Allied armies and forcing a negotiated peace before American industrial output made defeat inevitable. The plan lived and died by time. Day 1 and 2, penetrate the line and encircle Bastogne. Day 3 through 5, take the town and lock down the road network. Day 6 through 10, reach the Meuse River before American armor could respond. German planners calculated that any U.S. armored division would need at least a week to redeploy from southern positions. Their own horse-drawn logistics required that long. American motorization, they assumed, would still obey the same physical limits. That assumption was fatal. By December 20th, day 4 of the offensive, Bastogne was still holding. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and outnumbered, refused to break. German forces owned the ground around the town but could not punch through. Model's timetable was bleeding out. If American armor arrived before Bastogne fell, the offensive would stall in the forest, panzer divisions trapped, exposed to Allied air power the moment the weather cleared. On December 21st, Kokot, commanding the 26th Volksgrenadier Division around Bastogne, received new orders. Capture the town within 24 hours. American reinforcements are approaching from the south. Kokot did the math. Patton's division was still 100 miles away. Even for Americans, that meant days. Or so he believed. The reality had already announced itself. On December 20th at 11:30 hours, 8 miles south of Bastogne, Oberleutnant Klaus Weber crouched in a snow-choked foxhole, binoculars fixed on the road. His mission was simple: report any American movement from the south. At 11:47, the first column appeared. 12 Sherman tanks, speed roughly 9 miles per hour. Weber radioed in. American armor advancing, estimated 1 company. 6 75mm anti-tank guns were already positioned. Doctrine was clear: let the lead tanks pass, kill the center, trap the rest. At 12:03, the guns fired. 2 Shermans erupted. The column halted. American infantry spilled out, moving to flank. Weber settled in. Standard procedure now. The Americans would pause, call artillery, wait for support. Hours would pass. 8 minutes later, everything broke apart. At 12:11, the remaining American tanks began moving again. Not retreating, not waiting. They drove straight off the road, cutting across snow-covered fields, bypassing Weber's position entirely, and continuing north. Weber grabbed his radio. "Sir, the Americans aren't stopping. They're abandoning disabled tanks and continuing the advance." The reply came sharp. "Impossible. No armored unit abandons vehicles without recovery. They'll return." They didn't. Weber watched them vanish over the ridge, trading 2 tanks for 8 minutes of time. At 12:45, a second column arrived. 20 tanks. Weber didn't fire. He knew the outcome. At 13:20, a third column, 18 tanks. At 14:05, a fourth, 24 more. By 14:30, Weber's voice was tight with disbelief. "Sir, we've counted 74 tanks in 3 hours. They don't stop. Every engagement is bypassed. We aren't delaying them, we're just counting them." There was a long silence. Then the order. "Understood. Fall back. Conserve ammunition." Headquarters had grasped it too. The Americans weren't fighting for ground, they were racing time. And nothing, ambushes, destroyed bridges, winter weather, was slowing them down. At German intelligence headquarters later that afternoon, Oberst Hinrich von Luttwitz, chief of staff for 47th Panzer Corps, stared at fuel reports that defied logic. American armor was advancing without fuel depots. German panzer divisions required fixed depots every 31 miles. Each took 48 hours to establish and demanded roughly 220 tons of fuel hauled by horses or captured trucks. Predictable, targetable. The Americans had none. Their fuel moved with the tanks. 240 GMC trucks, each carrying 800 gallons in portable bladders. 80 refueled forward units, 80 returned south, 80 stayed in transit. Refueling time per Sherman, 8 minutes. Von Luttwitz ran the numbers. 192,000 gallons per day, enough to move 400 tanks. Germany delivered less than that in a week. And then came the next report. The Americans had crossed the Sauer River at Martelange. Von Luttwitz checked the time. "Impossible. Our engineers destroyed that bridge 45 minutes ago." The photographs said otherwise. A new bridge, operational, 656 feet long, a span German engineers estimated would take 72 hours to rebuild. The Americans had done it in 4 hours and 15 minutes. Prefabricated M2 treadway sections, inflatable pontoons, floodlights, rotating shifts. Work continued through darkness. Von Luttwitz wrote that night, "The Americans are not constrained by the same physical limits. Infrastructure cannot delay them." But the final shock came with the weather. Cloud ceiling sat at 650 feet, visibility under 1¼ miles, conditions no Air Force should operate in. American aircraft were flying anyway. 6 forward airstrips had been built in 1 week using prefabricated steel matting, positioned within 25 miles of the front. Ground-based radar guided pilots through clouds. Visual contact was only needed at the final seconds. 1,200 P-47 Thunderbolts assigned. 400 sorties per day now. 2,000 when skies cleared. Von Luttwitz looked at the map. German armor around Bastogne sat exposed, every vehicle already marked in red. He wrote, "American air power is infrastructure dependent, not weather dependent, and they build infrastructure faster than we can destroy it." By nightfall, American fighter bombers destroyed 18 tanks and 42 supply trucks in a single strike. The sky was still overcast. At 0200 hours on December 22nd, Kokot stared at the final calculations. American advance rate, 1.3 miles per hour, sustained for 48 hours. German doctrine assumed 0.2, 7 times faster than planned. At that speed, American armor would reach Bastogne's perimeter in under 3 hours. Kokot radioed Corps headquarters. Request withdrawal before we're trapped between relief forces and the town. The reply was immediate. Withdrawal denied. Hold positions. Kokot set the handset down. There were no reinforcements coming. Everyone knew it. At 0447, 13 minutes ahead of prediction, the first Sherman tanks broke through to the 101st Airborne perimeter. The siege was over. At 0515, Kokot watched through his binoculars as American tank crews and paratroopers met at Bastogne's southern edge. Embraces, handshakes, supply trucks already rolling in. He ordered new defensive lines, but he understood the truth. The Americans had rewritten the rules. Within 24 hours, 3 bridges would span the Zower. Within 48, 250,000 men and 40,000 vehicles would concentrate around Bastogne. Within 72 hours, 2,000 aircraft would own the sky. On December 26th, von Lüttwitz wrote, "We are not losing battles, we are losing to a production line." Years later, Kokot described that first sight of American tanks. It felt as if the rules had changed mid-battle. At Bastogne, modern warfare revealed its final form, not decided by courage alone, not by tactics alone, but by the system that could move an army 100 miles in 2 days and make the impossible routine.